This week on the show, we have Mr. Doug Marcello of Saxon and Strum. Yes, Doug is a lawyer. And before you go, oh my God, lawyers, Doug is a good friend to the trucking industry. Yes, Doug is a trucking defense lawyer. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast.
Doug, it is such a pleasure to welcome you to the show. Can you start off by introducing yourself to our viewers?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Honored to be here as always. Doug Marcello. I am a trucking defense attorney. I've done that for about the last 30 years. Been an attorney for about 112 years. I have had cases, 35 states and even one case up in Canada one time. And I have my CDL. Belong to a lot of organizations and speak around not just the country, but you guys have been kind enough to have me up north and look forward to it.
Yeah, it's great. You are well known as you said, a trucking defense lawyer, but really I'd translate that and say you're a friend to the trucking industry and trucking companies individually.
Agreed.
So for that, Doug,
you.
thank you so much because
My pleasure. I've been very blessed and the industry's been very good to me. So whatever I can give back, it still will not be as much as it's given to me. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, our industry sometimes needs good defense.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hey, one of the things that I heard you speak about, that was Johnny's event. The John, what was that called again?
It was our Fleet Safety Council Central Chapter meeting back in June of June of this year.
Great event.
I mentioned to you that I'm stealing this from you, but can you just address the YouTube problem for a minute?
Yeah. What folks have run into, and I've have an acquaintance who's a jury consultant that had shared with me that he's run into this a number of times. Drivers will be out on the road, get into an accident. In today's digital world, they can tell what you're doing whenever it is. And a number of times upon inspecting the phone, they find out, they don't even have to look at it digitally. They find out that the driver was on YouTube at the time. Now, we can, and I'll be the first to confess, there are times that I listen to things on YouTube. But the problem's going to be this, because it is YouTube, it begs a visual kind of sensory perception that people have, that if you are on YouTube, whether you're listening or not, it's going to be the perception. The argument's going to be you were watching TV at the time of the accident. It's along the same lines of people going, well, I can hands-free, one-touch or voice-activated text when I'm driving. You can, but the records are going to show you texted when you were driving. And so now it comes down to, are they going to believe that you did it without using your phone? Just did it vocally. So that's the thing we run into with YouTube as well.
Well, and since I heard you talk about it, it didn't take me long. I Googled it, and maybe you don't know, but I was astonished. 2.6 billion users of YouTube music. 2.6 billion. Some of them got to be truck drivers.
Yeah, it is one of, if not the largest source of music for folks. It is the second largest source of searches of any platform, only except by Google, which owns it.
Yeah.
So, it has really become, when I talk about a lot of things, investigation or post-accident, I always say we live in a YouTube society, and people expect there to be video either before, during, or after the accident. A number of times we've sent folks out, investigators, we've been able to get the accident on Ring doorbells. We'll canvass the area, intersection cameras, adjoining businesses out there. But that's what people expect to see, let alone the in-cab cameras, because a lot of folks are used to seeing those on urban buses. Now, I don't know up with your folks, but down here, particularly, let's say SEPTA in Philadelphia, they have interior cameras on it so that after the accident, the people who make claims, they actually know were on the bus, as opposed to coming in later or just saying they were. So, there's all type of video around today, and we see all type of things, those billions of users you referred to.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I got to be careful because even this podcast, I create an Audible version of it, and it's on YouTube Music. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, anyway, and John and I have been fortunate enough to interview a cell phone forensic guy. It's amazing what they can find from cell phone. But let's change subjects
All
because,
right.
well, for one, I'll say thank you, Doug, because that's a great piece of information that I'm using at my driver meetings now, because I really don't believe drivers understand they
No.
can't
No.
use YouTube, even the music, in the cab of their truck,
Wow.
or else they'll need to hire Doug to try to defend. Well, it's hard to defend, is it not?
It is.
It's difficult. You've got to come into a causation thing. Now, you run into several things. First of all, and the YouTube thing's a whole different issue on. But when the FMCSA has commissioned phone studies, what are buried in those phone studies, and I saw it in the one that Virginia Tech did, that they made the regulations about phone use in the States. Then when I looked at the footnotes, I found this has occurred at least one other, and I think multiple other ones. Here's the thing. They found that drivers, particularly at nighttime, who were on a hands-free phone had less incidents than drivers who were not on the phone.
Interesting.
Think about that. And so one of the things I'm trying to look into is, I don't know how far I'll get, is we have a huge issue with distracted driving. And I think a lot of the distraction is the mental vacuum that's there. I mean, we're asking people to do tasks for 11 hours a day with just looking straight ahead. It seems counterintuitive. Is there some way that we can deal with that? There's a professor out at USC that says it's not an addiction, it's a habit. Is it a habit we can break? How can we do it? And maybe the answer is to fill the vacuum with something that's non-distracting, but at the same time keeps people mentally alive.
When I was so this is a long time ago, when I was in my early 20s, so very long time ago, I worked for a sign company and we produced billboards. And there was a study done at that time that the highways with the highest concentration of billboards actually had the fewest collisions.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of goes to with what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that was a very old study, obviously, because probably 40.
Well, I was going to say, when I used to drive, when I was a little pup, one of the things that I did was I created a routine. So, you learned early on that you needed to check your gauges, you need to check your mirrors left and right, and also look out the window. So I created this routine that said, at every so many, seconds, once a minute or something like that, you did this scan. So I'd always make a point of, doing this scan of sorts. And the challenging part was, and you guys are hitting it on the head, was that dead zone between that scan. You had to fill that. So, I always had music playing, and it was something that I like to listen to, not just to create a white noise. And one of the things I used to love to listen to was talk radio, but you had to make a point of break away from the talk radio to do your routine, right? You had to make sure of that. And you always looked far enough ahead, looked in your mirrors, and it wasn't just a scan. It was actually look at it. Look at the gauges. Look at them. Don't just scan them and look for a red light. No, scan them, see where they're at. Look way ahead. Look in the mirrors and try to look way back in the mirror to see what was going on. But, and at the same time, listen to a little bit of talk radio or some music or whatever like that. My dance routine never, ever did come to fruition. So I didn't have the room in the cab to do that. So,
I was talking years ago to a woman in Austria, and she was saying that the problem with particularly the States, and why we had so many accidents, was our speed limit. It was too low. She said, like over here on the Autobahn, you can't drift off in your mind. You are focused all the time because you're
Yep.
going 150 or so miles an hour.
Yep.
I
Yep.
don't think the FMCSA or safety experts would buy that, but there's
Yeah.
a different
No.
perspective out there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we have too many young people nowadays that think I can do, 200 kilometers an hour in my dad's car, this new Audi or this Mercedes or whatever. It's like, yes, you probably can. However, this is not NASCAR or F1. All the other people around you are not driving at that same speed or have that skill level to drive at that kind of speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're driving on the highway.
Talk about drivers meetings. One of the things I'm emphasizing now is, if you look down to text or whatever it is, how many seconds it is, how many feet you're traveling at 55, 60, 65 miles an hour. And if I put you in the cab, blindfolded you and said, I want you to drive for that many seconds at 65 miles an hour, you would rebel. But that's what we have now. And that's what we're facing right now.
It's crazy. Now, let's talk about, you mentioned something about November the 18th
Yeah.
and the Clearinghouse. So that's, for the listeners, that's my short form of the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. What's happening November the 18th?
November the 18th, what's happening is they have finally linked the Clearinghouse, where all of the positive drug and alcohol tests have to go into, run by the FMCSA, link those to each individual state's driver motor vehicle location so that they'll get notified. And if you are in the Clearinghouse, your license will be degraded. You'll be taken down from a CDL to a regular driver. Now, the way most of these states are doing it, and I think this is the way to do it. For example, here in Pennsylvania, we sent out 3,000 letters to drivers going, hey, and we did it proactively. You showed up in the Clearinghouse. You're going to have your CDL taken down. If this isn't correct or there's a mistake or something, tell us, rather than just stripping with a license on it. Yesterday, I did a webinar for the folks in South Carolina. I think they said they sent out 1,300 letters. But what's going to happen is that the CDL, you may have in your possession a CDL, but when you get to a roadside and they run it, if you are in the Clearinghouse, then there's a situation where you're not going to have the CDL. You're going to be downgraded at that point. A lot of issues come up on that, a lot of challenges on it. Actually, the American Trucking Research Institute did a study, and part of that was a survey of drivers. If it's legal in your state to use marijuana, can you use it as a commercial driver? 19% said they didn't know. 6% said they thought they could. That's a quarter of the drivers who either don't know or think that they can on that. So, it's something that really is potential. We've got now 277,000 drivers who have tested positive into the Clearinghouse. And that's just at the end of August. Of those, about 83,000 have gone through the process and come back in and be able to drive again. But that still leaves 177,000 drivers out of the driver pool because they still haven't cleared the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse.
Right.
Well, and it makes you wonder how many of those have left the industry.
Just to be,
You can run the head, John. I was talking to somebody and they said that they went to somebody they knew who has a non-CDL fleet and said to him, like, how do you deal with, or basically has another fleet, says, how do you deal with this whole situation, particularly where they were located in a large city, and he goes, I put them in the non-CDL units over there. So they're, unfortunately, they're out there driving. And the other thing we talked about yesterday is until they come up with a toxicity level of THC, that it's going to be a binary question, yes or no. That's it.
Yeah. And so just to be clear for our listeners, those letters that you're talking about are for drivers who've had a positive drug test report submitted to the Clearinghouse.
Yeah, at least, John, where it's going to be one where their name's in the Clearinghouse. Okay.
And they haven't completed the return to duty.
Yeah. And again, we're talking about a government program inputting data. So that, like we've seen it on CSA, then human frailty, there's a chance for errors in there. And I think this is a good thing to notify drivers. Go like, look, we have you as reported in the clearinghouse. We're going to take your CDL by a certain date. If that's wrong, send us proof or send us that you're going through it so we can kind of clean it up. And I think that's a positive process in that.
Now, Doug, just so you know, our listeners are about 60-40, 60% American and 40% Canadian. But those Canadian listeners may be asking right now, is there any talk about the clearinghouse sending that same letter to the provinces involved so that driver gets suspended or loses their CDL? Is there any talk of that yet?
And I have not heard anything about that.
Okay.
The interaction there, and I haven't heard any combination on that as well. So
I will bet that that's coming, but probably many years down the road. Since, I mean, John, how many years has it been that there's been the spot on the SMS overview? What do you call it? The safer stat.
Yeah.
There for the Canadian information. There is a contract signed between the two governments to exchange that inspection info. Never happened.
No, Alberta is about the only province I know that has allowed flow, but it's not with all U.S. states. It's mostly with the western states underneath Alberta where we see some of it, but it's not a complete process. Yeah, it needs
I can
to
tell
be.
you here in Ontario, there's only 13 states, I believe it is, that tells the Ontario government about things like speeding tickets.
Yep.
I can tell you which one for sure doesn't, but don't ask me how.
Well, one of the key things, particularly for those listening in the States, for the drivers, make sure that you have your information up to date on your license, your address and everything. Because as a general rule, most of the mail from the DMVs of the states is not forwarded. And so it's either going to go to the old address, it's going to end up with someone with whom you no longer reside. Make sure you get the information.
And I'll throw what I think is a little bit humorous. You mentioned no longer residing and things.
Yeah.
Here in Ontario, the Ontario government, in their wisdom, has decided they won't remind you that your license is going to expire any longer by mail.
Yeah.
You can sign up for a text reminder, but you've got to physically go there and give them permission to text you. So, so there's unlicensed drivers out there because they didn't get the renewal notification because there isn't one.
Wow.
But do you know approximately how many positive drug tests, since I'm talking about cannabis specifically, since cannabis has been legalized in Canada, right across the country, and I believe it's 37 states, something like that. It's in the 30s, I understand.
Yeah.
Do you know offhand how many positive cannabis tests there have been since this legalization started to happen?
In the States for marijuana, I think the number has been just north of 200,000, right around the 200,000 positive tests on it. There's a study that I just read in the New York Times the other week to give you the magnitude of the problem, where about 6% of the population of the United States has a form of marijuana use disorder. Now, that's not mean they're marijuana users, but it means that the use is to such a degree that it is problematic. And there is about 1% who have a marijuana dependency or have become an addiction to marijuana. So you're talking 18 million people with a dependency problem and 3 million people with an addiction on it. And let alone, all the medical problems that can come from it. The states have started early, the increase in psychosis, particularly for young people under 25. Not here to moralize, but, there are health implications out there on a number of levels on this. And then you have the drivers who unsuspectingly use CBD oil, unregulated, And I was just at the American Trucking Association, had a toxicity doctor in, and he indicated CBD oil by itself doesn't do anything for you. The only way it's going to help you is, or give you any release, if it has THC in it. And the THC products that are out there now, the legal products, there has been what the New York Times described almost as an arms race to increase the level of potency of it. So even stuff that's out there is just getting more and more potent all the time.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, it's going to really be a long-term issue.
I heard something on the radio here recently. I was listening to, actually, it was Road Dog Trucking on Sirius XM. I was listening to it. There was something about it, and FDA has not even approved a number of these CBD oil applications and whatnot. So that's a bit problematic.
John, I don't think there's been any regulation or approval on any of it. It's totally, it's totally the Wild West out there, totally unregulated on the whole
Right.
thing. You know, I was in California a couple of weeks ago, THC infused beer they have out there. You know, that's the products. And so, you know, it used to be, for how many years, guys, the old secondhand smoke stores, you know?
Yep.
Now, I was talking to on a webinar the one time, and one of the safety directors a couple of months ago said, let me tell you the best one I have. I had a driver tested positive for cocaine, and he said it wasn't his fault because there was a crack house down the street and a tornado blew through. So,
Well,
uh,
I'm just waiting to see if they're going to infuse Doritos with THC, because then that'll take care of the munchie problem.
I think it's a circular issue, John. So,
And people, yeah, that's that global warming problem again that driver was pointing out.
Yeah, exactly.
Any any last word on marijuana, cannabis, THC before I ask you a different highway?
I think we're good with that one. So,
Okay.
but I appreciate it.
This one came to my head just while you were talking about one of the other things. What are you seeing right now? Because you are a lawyer, what are you seeing in courts that trucking companies might be able to do in-house to make them more defensible? What could they do to help you in your role as a defense attorney?
Well, you know, I can go into detail on this, but I think we're going to go longer than Ken Burns does on these things. But I think kind of the short version is this: is the most important part of the case is now before the accident happens. What we need to do is to look at the consequences of risk and try to be proactive on it. I do a talk, the death by dogma, things companies do, and most companies do it. They've always done it, but can get you be problematic. Manuals, make sure that your manuals isn't just or just a set of slogans, but make sure that they are what you need to do, limit them, reduce your exposure. For the call, whoever takes the call from the accident, make sure they know the importance of their position, takes down the least information that is needed, and go from there. Data, we're no longer operating mechanical devices. These are electronic devices. They're coming in OEM with everything from the ECM to telematics to the forward-looking radar, et cetera. Make sure you know what you have, monitor it, analyze it. What is the data that most relates to your accidents? Monitor that, and then discipline it on there. But I think the biggest thing, if anything, is this: is people talk about a lawsuit abuse situation we have. We're beyond that. It is a crisis, and it doesn't do it justice to call it anything less than a crisis of what's going on.
Yeah.
We have to do what our part is to take away the hook that they can get into the companies in this time of crisis. And I think the biggest thing we have to do there is to do and be ever vigilant in terms of what is it, because they're not looking for the accident. They're looking at systemic failures. And that's where the companies, to answer your question, have to get ahead of the curve on that.
Well, one of the things I heard you say, and I want to make sure I heard it correctly, the person, try to get with it, Chris, the person who takes that phone call takes down only the information that's necessary and nothing more. Is that what I heard?
Exactly. Because here's the deal. If they take down information, let's say the description of the accident or something like that, and they get it wrong, we're going to have to live with that through the entire trial. And we can try to correct it, say they made a mistake, but the other sides, the billboard attorneys, are going to be quick to say, well, yeah, right. That's what he took down. And that's what was said before safety got involved and before the lawyers got involved. Let's minimalize it. Where's it at? Anybody injured, any hazmat spill, then let's get it over to, depending on the nature and severity of the accident, let's get it over to somebody else now.
Well, I was going to say, to perfectly fit with that, it doesn't matter what happened
Right.
at that point in the game. It doesn't matter what happened. We need to deal with the now of, okay, we got to clean this up. We got to get injured parties dealt with and whatnot. We don't need to go, holy crap, what happened, Bob? Geez, it's like, no, okay. Is everybody all right? What do we need to do?
I just gave a talk to, and I've been a client of mine, and I've been kind of saying this for years. And so I've got the opportunity to talk to their terminal managers and like, look, you guys aren't investigators. I understand human nature. You mean well, but if you get into this, talk to the driver, get factual background, you're going to end up in a deposition, and the definition, the difference between a definition and a colonoscopy, one of them is has an unpleasant preparation and is an intrusive bodily function. And the other one is a medical procedure. So, so
That's a good one. I like that.
Wow.
Yeah, front of the meal, tip your waiters, but thank you.
Yeah.
Doug,
Yeah.
last word to you, as we're just heading into what we shoot for, about a 30-minute talk. But what last parting words would you like to leave the audience with?
Best defense to an accident, best defense to a lawsuit is not have an accident. The premium's on safety. And I'm getting ready to do another talk. John, if you got an opening for me, glad to come up and give it. It's called Safety Profit. And the notion is that the safety office is too often looked at being folks who are a financial burden. Everybody else generates profit. But in today's world of deductibles and retention, self-insurance, safety is what's going to determine the bottom line, the profits of companies. And they are the ones that can do all different other departments, reduce the risk and try to make sure that we don't have the accident. That's the best way to denuclearize your company.
Right. Makes
It's
sense.
about every 1.3 million miles, a truck is involved in a crash. That may sound like a lot of miles, but there's a lot of crashes. So,
Well, you look at it in the States, 3 million truck drivers, 8 million people in trucking. So 3 million drivers can get to 1.3 million miles. Pretty darn cool.
Yes.
I became an attorney to avoid math, so I'll let you guys figure it out.
Yeah, no doubt.
Doug Marcello,
Perfect.
thank you so much.
Oh, thanks,
coming on
guys.
the
It's
show
always a
today.
pleasure. Greatly enjoy it and appreciate the opportunity. Honored to be here.
Thanks, Doug. You are awesome and truly a friend to the trucking industry. If you got something out of this, please leave us a comment, click like, and subscribe. And John and I will see you next week on the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast. Have a safe week.